So in today's video, we're going to look at how to enable PvP by building out a health and bullet damage system, and also death, which includes the dying and dead animations. So I'm going to walk you through that today. And I think we're going to do this in two parts. Today, we're going to cover that. And then in a follow-up video, we're going to look at how we can handle respawning the players. So let's just dive in. We left off with our gunfire raycast script here. And if you've been following along, you'll be able to pick right back up where we left off, or go grab one of the projects or the last project from my Patreon and you'll be able to jump right in. So what we did here is we're detecting whether a mob was hit or actually just killed. And we're going to build upon this a little bit. So if the gunfire has detected a collision, let's also check for a player collision. Okay, first let's just see that we can get to this point where we can actually use our raycast or our fire raycast collision to actually see if we can hit a player or detect if we can hit a player. And just to give you a quick update from the last video, I removed the parent node object that the aim cast and fire cast were held within. This is going to allow us to exclude the parent object so that you're not just shooting yourself and detecting yourself when you're like aiming down or whatever. So this, I just wanted to note that. So just move this to the top level of your player and hit that exclude if you don't want to be able to shoot yourself. So let's go ahead and give this a run through. We'll have a look at our current status of everything. We should be able to see player hit. I'm going to pull up my rifle here, drop in another client. Nice. All right, so he's got his pistol out and this guy is got his rifle. And let's, whoop, I'm getting confused myself on which screen I'm using. So let's go ahead and shoot this guy. Player hit, player hit. Perfect, as you can see in the console. And let's move over to the other guy and just make sure we can do that both ways. And I don't have a gun out, so it's not firing. Let me pull my pistol out and we'll shoot him, pull out the rifle, shoot him. Okay, so that looks great. We're gonna go ahead and move on because I just wanted to make sure where we left off is a good place to start. So right here with player hit, and this code I'm showing you today, it's part of my project, but if you're not using mine, you can basically use the general idea here to add in a basic PvP system. So keep following along if you're looking to see how to add that to your game. And so what I'm doing here is I'm just grabbing the player object that we just collided with, and I'm calling the hit function. And of course we don't have a hit function yet because we're setting this up. So let's just go ahead to the player object. And again, this can be your player object wherever you want to add it. Go ahead and add it right here. We'll say function hit. And we just want to add in or pass in the weapon that was used to shoot the player. And the reason why I want to do that is so that we know what type of damage to apply. And the reason why I want to pass in the weapon that hit the player is so that we know what damage to apply to that player. So this is a really basic setup. So for your game, you may want to expand the weapon firing system so that maybe you can have crit damage. Well, this isn't going to do that. This is just getting started at a base level. And because the context of this hit occurs on the server, I want to make sure that it stays on the server. So we're going to go ahead and add a check here to make sure it's on the multiplayer side. For now, we're just going to add a simple print statement that says which player was hit and by which type of weapon that it was hit. And this player is tied to the player that was actually hit. Remember, so back in this gun ray cast, we're actually calling to the player that was hit, not the player that's firing the weapon. So this is the player that's hit. And then we pass in this get active weapon, which I'll show you in a minute. And it's going to pass in that weapon here. And we'll just go ahead and print out the name of the weapon and which player was hit. So in order to check which weapon we're currently selected, we're going to create a function over back in our player script called get active weapon, just to expose that to another script. Okay, so we're just making a call to our weapon manager class to get the current weapon based on what our player's active weapon ID. And just as a reminder, we are synchronizing that weapon ID so it can be carried over between the client and server. So when this get weapon is called, it just returns the current weapon that's in the inventory. And again, this is just a really basic system. Your system could be quite different based on your requirements and how you want your gameplay to look. Okay, so now we've got the gun ray cast side of things completed, so we can move on from here. So at this state, we have a ray cast that will detect if a player's been hit, and it will call to that hit function on the player that was actually hit, and then pass in the weapon that was used to hit the player by. All right, so let's move on to our player script, and we need to add a couple variables here to track player health and damage and that sort of thing. So I don't know, just pick anywhere where you think is best. Okay, So I've added a couple variables here that's going to track our health and whether or not the player is alive. I'm just setting it to 100. You can basically make that whatever you want, and is alive will be true. So when the player spawns, he is alive. And we're going to use this is alive to perform some checks along the way, and I'll show you as we hit those. All right, so let's go back to that hit function and wherever you have it in your code. Right here's mine. And let's just go ahead and do health minus equals weapon hit by, and we're going to grab the base damage for that weapon. And let's go ahead and print out the remaining health of our player. And before I forget, let's head on over to our property player synchronizer or our replication tab, and let's add that health to replicate so we can keep track of it across the clients and servers. And again, you can grab this on your client if you want to display health or show like a health bar. I'm not going to do that here. It's going to be really basic. And I think the other thing we want to do is make sure we add the is alive. So let me go grab that is alive variable. And that's going to be important to synchronize as well. Okay, so that's it for our replication. We just added health and is alive. Let's go back to our hit function. And you might be wondering, well, what's this base damage? Okay, so let's make an adjustment to our weapon script or our weapon class. And I want to add in a base damage field. And then of course we need to add that into our constructor. So let's go ahead and add that there. Great, so wherever we configure our weapons, we also need to update the base damage, which is why it's airing out. So for not having a weapon, we'll just say 0. And then for a pistol, I don't know, what do you think? 15 damage is enough. And then for our rifle, we'll just make it 25, or maybe, I don't know, let's make it 30. Great. So we have our 3 weapon slots, which is empty, 0 damage, pistol slot gives 15 base damage, and rifle slot gives 30. And this is an opportunity for you to build out your weapon system if you want to have crits or anything like that. Maybe you'll have a auto load like this weapon manager that will detect that sort of thing. And maybe that will provide crit damage configurations and that sort of thing so that you can apply that in real time in your game. And I would develop a weapon system to do that. Right now, this is really basic and static, so the damages are just going to stay hard coded. Okay, back over in our player script, we need to check if the player has died, if their health gets too low. Okay, so this is pretty simple. If our health gets below or equal to 0, the player is dead. So we're going to mark them as dead, so they are no longer alive. And then I want to make a call to this death cleanup. It's kind of a morbid function name. I don't know, I have a chuckle when some of these things come along, but let's go ahead and create a death cleanup function to handle the process of when a player dies and maybe clean up maybe some animation stuff. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so what we're going to do is set our current animation to our die by gunfire, and then we're just going to do a quick print statement that says that player is now dead. I'm going to do some more logic in this in part 2. So this is basically a placeholder just to get the animations up and running. So this will be expanded in the follow-up video to this one. And we also need to add in a new animation called die by gunfire. So let's go back up to our animations, enum, die by gunfire. And then I'm also going to add another animation state called death. And before we get into the animations, there's a couple places where we should add in checks using this is alive variable. So let's go ahead and look at that now. So in our physics process function, we need to wrap this apply input with an is alive check because we don't want them to continue to move once they've been killed off. And I'll leave it this way in case we need to apply some additional functionality underneath the is alive condition. And one more area where we need to add it is down here where I have this check for is weapon enabled. Now you may not need this, but when I fire a gun, I want to make sure before I actually go through and do all these raycast calculations and call this RPC, I want to just make sure on the client side that we do have a weapon enabled. So to do that, let's go back to this weapon enable script under the player. And I just want to add right in here, if is alive. All right. So that just says if our weapon is enabled, meaning if we're alive, if we have a weapon equipped and we're not running, because these are the 3 main states where you can't fire a weapon in my game. I was going to omit jumping, but I kind of wanted to add it back in. I thought it would be nice for gameplay, although the animations don't really line up with it yet, so bear with me there. But for the current moment, when you fire a weapon, it's going to make sure that these checks or these conditions are met before you can actually fire it. And while we're down here, I want to add one more function, and it's to check if you can actually toggle or change your weapon, because maybe there's like one edge case where if you're dead, you can actually still toggle your weapon, and I didn't want the players to be able to do that because that would look really funny. So let's just go ahead and add a check or a function to be able to check for that. Okay, so let's go ahead and use that before we actually toggle weapons. It's gonna be right here. Whoops, wrong one. Okay, so if you change a weapon, meaning you've toggled, like you hit 1 or 2 in my demo game, it'll toggle between the rifle or pistol respectively. But let's go ahead and make a call to make sure that you can actually do that before we actually switch a weapon. We don't want the player that's dead to be able to keep toggling their weapon. So let's go ahead and make a call to is weapon change actionable. And if it is actionable, meaning he's alive, it'll go ahead and allow him to switch guns. Otherwise, we don't let him do that. I believe that is the last place where we need to use the is alive in this current demo. So let's get to the animation tree side of things. And over here, we're gonna need to create 2 new inputs. Let's add one called die by gunfire. And then we're gonna add another one called dead. And these need to be in a different spot in the hierarchy because we're gonna leverage the auto advance. So when a player dies by gunfire, that animation, when it finishes, it's gonna auto transition to dead. And the reason why I wanna have a dead animation separately is so that if during gameplay, everybody's already spawned in, if somebody dies and comes back to life and then somebody else is dead, when they respawn in the game, you don't want to see them go through that death animation. They just want to be dead in the dead state animation, which is lying flat. So it's kind of a trick to make sure you don't have a bunch of people going through the re-dying animation once they spawn back into the game when they see other killed players on the field. So let's go ahead and bump these up. Whoops, I did it. Just like reverse the 2, and then we'll bump this up to, I want it to be right after run, because jump has its own auto advance, and we don't want to auto advance to a die by gunfire if you jump. And then we'll go back to our dead, and we'll bump that one up. And I think we have it. So we have dead, jump up, whoops, die by gunfire, and then dead. And that's what we want. So then we just need to reconfigure these jumps to go to the correct place. So jump land, jump down, and jump up. And then we need to add 2 animations, one for dead and one for dying. And again, you guys can pull out whatever animations you have and wire this up respectively. So dying backwards for me is die by gunfire. And this one's dead. And we'll go here and here. And of course, you can build out these animations to support all types of different dying animations. And I felt that calling it die by gunfire would be a good start for that. And if we go over to the 3D tab, should be able to see that if we transition to die by gunfire, falls over, dies. I'm not sure why he's going up and down like that. That might be a bug in my animation. Yeah, that's definitely a bug in the animation. But it didn't transition automatically. Did I forget to do the auto advance? Die by gunfire, auto advance. Yeah, so let's do it again. Die by gunfire. That wobble there, just ignore that. That is, I'm having some problems with importing or exporting animations at the current time. I gotta work on that a little bit. So we go back to die by gunfire. He was gonna fall over and then he should just lay flat. So our animations are gonna be a little funky until I get that figured out. So in theory, that will work correctly because you are gonna have perfect dying animations. I think we've got our animation tree set up. And of course, just to review, this is where that die by gunfire occurs. We're gonna set the current animation to that, but we also need to make sure that we add a check for that over where our animations change. So right down here at the end of our change animation function, which I talked about in the last few videos, or a previous video, I should say. And we're gonna do that. And I'm just gonna add an extra equal sign. And I'm gonna copy paste this and say, let's go ahead and transition to, what did I call it? Die by gunfire. Funfire, that would be interesting. Gunfire, okay. So I think we have everything. Let's do a quick demo, and this should be a base PvP setup. Okay, just make sure we can still toggle weapons. I didn't break anything there, good. And then we'll come over to this guy, start client. He's on the roof again. Let's jump down. And you'll probably see that die by gunfire thing in a second here, that bug. So I'm going to shoot him, and you can see over in the console log there, he's been hit. Player 1's been hit by assault rifle 4, which is just the name of my gun. It's just the naming convention. And of course, his HP is dropping quickly. So if we switch back over to player 1, so now I'm in this window over here on the left, and I shoot him. What do I have? The rifle, it's equipped a pistol. So it should be taking like 10 damage off, or 15 damage. Yep, so pistol 2, player, whatever the unique ID is, which is player 2, is now hit with pistol, and you can see his HP is dropping there. So let's go back over to the first one I had, toggle his gun back out. I don't know why I keep untoggling it. Let's go ahead and shoot him till he dies. And again, he's dying, and there's our funky death animation, and now he's just dead. He's just gonna lay there dead. So he is dead as any dead animal or whatever has ever been dead. Now, he's just going to keep dying because I keep shooting him, because we don't have any respawn logic or death logic in place. So, oh, and did you see that bug? So when I jump up, his collision shape is still there. It's still pointing straight up. I didn't make it fall down. I do have a solution for that in the next video, and you could probably handle this in a few different ways. Maybe you want to just disable it or have it fall over. So there's a couple ways to do that. So now we have a basic PvP system in place. We have some health that can be that can take damage and get lower, and of course die, as you can see there. And let's go ahead and run one more test again, because I don't have any respawn logic in place. That's going to be in the next video, so make sure you're subscribed, because you're not going to want to miss it, because it's amazing. And let's go ahead and start client, and let's see, and so make sure our other client can shoot the, I mean, it's what I'm trying to do is make sure that both clients can kill and correctly shoot fire and cause damage basically to the other client, because I've found that when you're testing, maybe you're only going to test on the main client, the one over here, and that's like our host configuration. So that's also going to be a server, and you'll notice really quick things start coming out of the woodwork if you've set something up wrong. If you start testing over on the client, the actual client, not the host client, as your RPCs or some of your sync variables will have incorrect authority or something like that. So it's always good to check both, and even do like a dedicated local server build if you can do that. Okay, so I've hit him, and let's make sure that he dies. So he's falling over. He's going to do his air death dance, and he is now dead. Perfect. And so let's try, how do I want to do this? Let's do something where we can test that logic, where I said that the reason why I did that death animation there as a separate thing is so that when new players spawn in and there's already a dead person, that it's going to actually work correctly. So that would be, let's do 3 instances. Let's run that. We'll do this guy's host, drop him in, and then we'll do client. And let's go ahead and kill that first guy. So I'm gonna shoot him till he dies. So he's dead, and he should be in the dead animation. And we'll go ahead and drop this client in, and that guy should show up dead if I did everything right. I didn't. Did you see how he did that fumble there? So that's not correct. And I know what the fix is for that. So what's gonna happen is when he comes back to life, the current animation, this die by gunfire, it actually transitions to the next one, but we don't actually set the current animation. So I'm not really sure if this is the best way to do this today, but let's just say after it transitions, we need to update the animation to the death state. And this is probably going to be one of those situations where you may want to have a callback to the end of one of your animations. I'm not going to cover that today, and this may cut that animation short. So let's just see what that looks like. If this doesn't work, I'm going to skip it for today, because I didn't want to get into too deep into the animation stuff. So I have a feeling this is just going to cut his death animation short. I don't know. Let's just see. Drop in the other client. And let's go ahead and blow him away. Let's see what happens. So he's dying. He's dying. No, I guess it looked normal. I guess he died at a reasonable pace. So, and then let's drop in the other client and see how bad. Let's just make sure this is going to work. And yeah, he's already dead. So that, I think that change worked. He was just there on the ground. He didn't do that double bounce animation. So that's a quick hack. I'm not sure I would recommend that. I think there's probably a better way to do that. Or if you notice any future problems or whatever, that's one way to fix it. And before I go, here's a little quick sneak peek at what's going to happen in the next video. Once I end up killing this guy, you can see I'll get a respawn window on the player that's dead with a "you are dead" message. The respawn happens, and we'll go ahead and respawn him back in. And now he can just jump right back in and play. And let's just go ahead and kill the other guy. And he's dead now. So that's going to be in the next video. If you want to see how I do that, please subscribe and like this one. And thanks for watching.